So, everyone, welcome to this webinar, which is part of the Data Lab community and Data Lab Academy series on overcoming imposter syndrome as a data and AI professional. This is part of an employability series, and we have several linked events. Introducing myself, my name is Marianne Dunbar. I'm the manager of the Data Lab Academy, which has supported more than 1,000 master's students over the last 8 years who have been studying master's programmes at universities in Scotland. And it gives me great pleasure to have two fabulous panellists from that cohort, Alan Stevenson and Christina Christofi. The employability series aims to boost your understanding of the data and AI industry, hopefully giving you tools and information to make decisions for your next move or your first move into a career in the sector. Previous topics have covered career in research and development. That was last week. And next week, we're going to be talking about how to master technical questions in the interview. Just a reminder, the Data Lab community is free and it's open to all. And it has about 4,500 members, a range of groups, including a student group. There's also a leadership group, if you're in that category of in our audience, as well as subject interest groups, including data visualization and data engineering. So thinking about today's session, there's also a mentoring group where members can find a mentor or indeed become a mentee to share experiences and support. So why this session today? Well, when we ask our Data Lab Academy students every year what topic they would like explored, dealing with imposter syndrome consistently comes highest on their wish list. And I think that's because moving on to that next stage, job, industrial placement, or even doing a research project involves putting newly found technical skills into practice. And that can be daunting. And that can be when self-doubt, that imposter syndrome can take hold. So we know that imposter syndrome is a universal experience. Emma Watson of Harry Potter fame says that as a child, she took her acting talent for granted. But now, she says, when she receives recognition, she feels uncomfortable and feels like an imposter. So through this conversation with our fantastic panel, Joanna Mackenzie, who I also worked with in the Data Lab a few years ago, Alan and Christina, we're going to explore what imposter syndrome means to data professionals and share strategies for living with it. Just to note that there will be time at the end for questions. Please post any questions during the webinar in the Q&A and we'll aim to return to those at the end of the session, time permitting. Okay, let's get going. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give you a brief intro covering their data journey, their current role, and an outline of what they are currently working on. So over to you, Joanna.
Hi, it's nice to be invited back. So I'm Joanna Mackenzie. I was previously, as Marianne mentioned, a Data Lab staff member. I was principal data scientist for the Data Lab, and I left that role about a year ago. And at the moment, I'm working for Bellrock Solutions, Bellrock Technology in the solutions team, and I develop data solutions for clients who use our data platform for their data work. I've had various career changes through my time, and actually I think that experience has maybe been what has brought imposter syndrome to light for me. So quite looking forward to getting into this conversation and talking about that in more detail.
Oh, thanks so much, Joanna. Alan, same from you, please.
Hey folks, my name's Alan. I'm a Data Lab graduate. I need to get the year right now, 2021, I think, 2020 to 2021.
Yes.
Good, that's a good start. And I've done various different roles throughout my career. I decided at that time to go back and do the masters, and since then I now work in a company called Weights and Biases, who are like an ML ops platform. They help companies organize, track, and manage their machine learning workflows. And I work in the customer success team, so I'm working with our prospective customers and our actual customers, both pre and post sales, as a technical point of contact.
Thanks, Alan. Christina?
I was actually trying to remember which year I graduated the MSc program. But hello, I'm Christina. I was an MSc student, I want to say 5 years ago. Was it 2018? I finished, Marianne.
It was. I think it was 1819. Yes.
It's been a while. But yeah, I was an MSc student, and I studied data analytics. I did my placement at NatWest, and I've been working there since. I had multiple roles within the organization, from data scientist to machine learning engineer, and now I'm a strategy and innovation manager. So yeah, it's been interesting. So very, very excited to be here.
Oh, brilliant. So we're just going to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome and how that has affected our panelists. So I'm going to start with Joanna. I always love having Joanna in the room because I know I can always throw a big question at her. So I'm starting with a big one. What does imposter syndrome mean to you, Joanna?
It's an interesting one. I'm going to tell a story. So 2018 has come up already. That was Christina's year, apparently. It was also the year I joined the Data Lab. So in the sort of 10 years previously, I had been an analyst in the wind industry. I worked with wind farms. I had learned all the standards. I knew people out in the networks in there. I had spent a lot of time working with a particular technology in a particular sector, and I was starting to feel that I had a level of expertise there. 10 years is a long time. You can get a lot of exposure to that in there. But 2018, I was ready for a change, and that's when I applied to and joined the Data Lab as a data scientist. That was a bit of a move. I wasn't an analyst anymore. I was using sort of more of my coding skills, and I didn't have all of that sector expertise anymore to lean on. So what I found was that the expectations of what I was bringing to the role changed, and I couldn't lean on the same set of skills that I had previously had. I wasn't sure what the expectations were anymore, and I felt I had a lot to prove. Felt I had to come in and I had to be able to be good at this data science stuff, even though I'd never used machine learning, and I was still finding my way as to what that actually meant in practice. And that was when I had imposter syndrome to the most anywhere else in my career. And I think there's a number of things that fed into that. There was that lack of having that expertise, that security that I'd had previously. So that out of your comfort zone feeling. And so that led into itself to being a little bit more anxious about that, about your own expectations, what you can bring to the role. There was a truth to the fact that I was now in a new situation and I hadn't proven myself. So I think to some extent that anxiety was warranted, but nevertheless, it's still quite debilitating. You still feel it, and it's not nice to feel insecure all the time. So that sort of change was part of it. But it hadn't been so acute when I was younger. So I've gone through a number of career changes. I started off in particle physics. I did physics teaching for a bit before I went into the wind industry. But in all of those, I had gone for kind of beginner roles, kind of graduate roles, and that idea that I was developing into a new role was part of it. So there was an expectation of learning there. Whereas when I came to the data lab, I came straight into a data science role and I needed to deliver as a data scientist without having that graduate support in place. And with that bit of sector knowledge, that bit of analyst experience with me, which I should have been able to bring with me to the role. And I think I did bring with me to the role, but it took me a bit of time to make that mental adjustment. So I feel like that change, dealing with that change, was a big factor for me. The other thing you see a lot with imposter syndrome is people who are very successful very often get it. So you mentioned Emma Watson, who's very well known. Maya Angelou is the other one that gets brought up a lot. Apparently, she said, each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now, I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out, which is very classic imposter syndrome. So I've not gotten to the point in my career where there's that level of acclaim happening. Nobody's going to put me up for an Oscar or anything along those lines. But I wonder if there's another effect, which is essentially just things start to feel a bit disproportionate. You put in a certain amount of effort, but the level of acclaim is much higher just because of that additional bit of visibility. So I wonder if there's a second type of imposter syndrome that maybe those of us that don't get nominated for Oscars aren't maybe ready to experience.
Just before we move on, did you know that was imposter syndrome at the time, or is that just reflecting back?
I knew it was imposter syndrome at the time. Yes. The word imposter resonated when I heard about imposter syndrome. I felt like, yeah, the people don't know that I'm actually a physicist and an analyst, and I'm not actually a data scientist at all. And I'm going out and I'm talking to people about data science, and they're going to find out that I'm actually, technically speaking, an analyst. But of course, there's a lot of overlap in all of those skill sets. And in practice, there was no finding out. There was no comeuppance. Nobody in any way doubted that I could do the job, except me.
Well, that's just amazing. But Alan, just your perspective, because you talked about going back to university after having had a career and you're taking that shift. But that must have been really challenging on a number of levels. Like just that returning, that shifting into a new environment. So, was imposter syndrome one of the feelings that you felt?
Yeah, I think actually listening to Joanna's story, it actually strikes me that I've probably intentionally put myself, or intentionally or unintentionally, inadvertently maybe put myself into positions throughout my career where I'm kind of exacerbating the imposter syndrome. So I've kind of been in quite a few different pre-sales roles where I'm essentially the expert presented to the customer, and quite often I've gone into those roles without ever feeling like I was the expert, and so there's been an element of, well, I just need to pretend to be an expert and hope that they don't find me out, to use the phrase that Joanna mentioned. So I think I've probably kind of experienced it in like most of my roles that I've done. Definitely noticed it doing my master's. I think probably on a similar theme, I did maths and data science because everything I read said that you need to be really good at maths to be like a data scientist or an ML engineer. So I thought I better do maths. Like, having not really done maths since first year at university, I dread to think how many years before that would have been, like maybe 15 years or so. And at the time, most of the time I went to the pub, so I didn't have a particularly strong grounding in maths. So I really struggled with lots of maths, like undergrad maths graduates, and I just felt like I don't belong here. I don't know, they're all talking about these people, I don't know who they are, I don't know how to do the equations. So I really struggled with that, and I think it's just a case of reflecting on what you can do and trying to look objectively at the work that you're doing and seeing what you're producing and looking at the results, and just that objective look at what you're doing. And that really kind of helped me, or always helps me in all the roles, to kind of realize that actually I am doing a good job, people are grateful, it's successful, I am getting good results, regardless of how I might sort of think about it internally.
But surely achieving your MSc, because it's a huge achievement going back and studying at that sort of level. Did that not give you that sense of authenticity? I am the data scientist now. Well,
this is where I'm thinking, I've inadvertently made it worse for myself at every stage. So now I've joined Weights and Biases, and so we work with like all of the sort of poster children of the large language model ChatGPT era. They're all our customers, and so I'm speaking to sort of super smart people from different companies every day, and so I still have that. I guess that's the good and the bad message, is that I don't think it necessarily always goes away, but you become much more aware of it, and you become much more comfortable about feeling uncomfortable. So I do still feel like sometimes I'm speaking to these super smart people. Do I know enough? But the thing that I kind of look back on is that they're really good at what they're doing, and I'm not doing the same job. My job is a different role, and so it's not necessarily comparing them with me. It's about, you know, am I helping them to achieve what they want to achieve, and you know, when I look at it objectively, then I am. So again, it just comes back to trying to have a balanced view.
Well, that's just so interesting. Christina, what's your experience? Because I first met you when you were on the Data Lab MSc program, and I know that you came straight from your undergraduate program into that, and then placement with NatWest, and now you're a manager. I mean, that's quite a journey, because you're young, very young from my perspective. So did you have insecurities and fears along that journey about your capabilities?
100%. Like, hearing the stories, I can definitely resonate with everything, especially when I first joined through the placement and on a permanent basis after, as a data scientist. I remember thinking, I'm not as technical as the other people, because I come from maths background, so I didn't go through computer science degree. I'm not that technical, and at the same time, I was in the finance department, and I was thinking, I don't have the finance knowledge either. So where do I sit? If you look at it from different angles, I'm an imposter everywhere. And thinking about it and trying to figure out what my role is there, I started to think, you know, there's a reason why I'm here. There's a reason. They saw something in me to keep me here and to give me a permanent job. And I found that talking to people, collecting feedback, kind of made me realize what my strong talents are, and not talents, my strong aspects are, and what made me stand out in terms of other candidates when it came to getting a job. So definitely had the imposter syndrome, definitely felt like an imposter many times in different rooms and tasks I had to complete, and I still do in many ways. But I guess just trying to rationalize things as to what do I bring in the table, why am I here, and also when in doubt, talk to people, see what their views are of you, that in many cases are different, because what's going on in your head and the negative thoughts you have of yourself are not reflected and are not usually what people see. So it really helps to talk to people. That's what I have been doing.
Yes, it sounds as though you've all felt the same things, and that it's not like these feelings go away, that they're there, but it's how you deal with them. And looking back, it's easy to recognize. Do you think that there's, you know, at these key points, shifting from one part of data science or one job or one career to another, are there things that you could have done differently to make you feel more secure about why you're there and your abilities?
Should I go first?
Yes, please.
All right. So I guess looking back as to what I was not doing enough was reflect. So I guess I would go into full panic mode. Oh my God, I don't belong here. I don't know what I'm doing here. That kind of thing. But I wouldn't really reflect as to what have I done well, or why do I get those feelings in certain situations. And why do I, for example, lack confidence when I talk to specific people? Does it trigger something, whether it's an insecurity that I have, or not feeling like I'm belonging in a room? Because I have found that in the moments that I don't belong in the room, that's when I add value the most. So trying to rationalize things and bring the logic above emotions has really helped. And I wish I had done that more at the beginning than just going into full panic mode and just let those thoughts holding me back, basically.
I know it's interesting hearing Joanna talk about her experience in the data lab, because of course I would never have noticed. Joanna's always seemed to me just like such a professional and knowledgeable and completely comfortable person. So, Joanna, Joanna, you said you don't think anyone noticed. Do you think that that's a really good thought, isn't it? That we can be like swans gliding along, you know, looking smooth and underneath panicking, but actually perhaps people don't notice.
That's maybe the problem as well, because I've said this to one my friends on occasion, and they've said, "Okay, that's quite insightful." So I don't know if nobody's thought of this, but I'm the only person I ever see from the inside, right? I'm the only person I ever see from the inside. Everybody else I only see from the outside. So I don't know what anybody else's insecurities are. And you see that kind of exacerbated in social media and things. You see people's highlight reels in their Instagram feed and everything looks lovely and perfect. And we know that that's not a true reflection. But there's that secondary level that even more true, even with people you know day to day. You don't know how hard things are for them. You don't know what they feel anxious about. And actually, before we start displaying anxiety, it has to get quite extreme. So we only really see people at their worst or at their normal. So it's almost like there's an external component to imposter syndrome, which is I'm the only one that feels like this. Why is nobody else out there? Why is nobody talking about it? And it's one reason I was so keen to be part of this panel, because actually talking about these things is what reduces their power over us, because we start to get that glimpse into somebody else's internal world that says, actually, I'm not such an outlier. That's human. that's people. So
just to build on that, I guess I mentioned before that just by talking about it with people had really helped. And obviously it takes someone to feel comfortable with to be able to open up and talk about it. But I have found that when I would share that I'm anxious for a meeting or for something coming up, people will always bring back an example from their experience that they felt that way, and potentially why they felt that way that I might resonate with. And I that led me to get a mentor and someone that I built a relationship through the years that I know I can be comfortable to open up, and more often than you think we can resonate with each other through her career and through where I am right now. So just talking with people makes you realize I'm not the only one who's feeling that way. Everybody gets it.
I think these are really, really good points, and that the other thing I might suggest as well is that sometimes it's good to almost over prepare. Like if you feel like you've got imposter syndrome and you're worried about, well, if it's I don't know, if it's a presentation, will I remember everything I've got to say, or if it's a meeting, will I be able to answer all the questions they get asked me? So one thing sometimes I think that can be useful is you almost over prepare, and just to be sure, almost to convince yourself that like you have all the answers, you know what you're going to say, you've thought of every scenario. And I think I see a question about, if you lack confidence, how can you even get a job in a new career in data? And I think that also applies there, is that if you go in for an interview, then make sure that you're really well prepared. You've thought about different answers that they could ask you, or different questions, sorry, that they could ask you, and you've got answers, you've rehearsed it. And I think that preparation really helps to build the confidence, and over time that probably reduces, and you need to prepare less and less for each thing as time goes on. But I don't think it probably never goes away. You just learn to kind of manage it better.
absolutely. And the other thing is, nobody knows what your level of confidence is. They can test your competencies, and they can ask you about your attitudes, they can ask you about your skill set and your experience, but you can't really say, oh, but I'd only hire people with confidence level of 7.5 and above, so how much confidence have you got out of 10? That it doesn't really work, and it wouldn't work because, of course, it's self-reported data, and you couldn't compare one person's answer with anybody else's anyway. It wouldn't be valid. You do it anyway. That's how you do things that scare you. You are scared and you appreciate that, and yes, it's scary, or yes, it makes me anxious. Do it anyway if it's worth doing. So
Well, absolutely. And it's probably really helpful to accept that this is a natural thing. If 7 out of 10 people in their personal life and their work life feel imposter syndrome, then it seems like it is a human reaction. And is that helpful? as a
think-
statement?
Knowing that you're not alone in these feelings, knowing that it's a absolutely valid response to change and uncertainty and a disconnect between your level of expectations of yourself and the skill set that you feel you're bringing. All of these things, it's a rational response to some extent, and understanding that it's common and experienced by lots of people robs it of a lot of its power, I think.
Mm.
And one of the things, so this is not something I was talking to my wife about doing this, and she said one thing that she's been told is to make a note of things. So, like, if you're, every time that something goes well that you're, proud of, or it's been successful, and maybe you were worried about it beforehand, make a note of that, and then, the next time it happens, you can review the past successes, and and all these things add up to building more confidence in the abilities and kind of reducing the impact of the imposter syndrome.
That's
It's fun.
actually oh, sorry. I was
Oh,
gonna say that's
go ahead,
actually
Pina.
something that I do actively. So there is this quote, "Fake it till you make it," that I truly believe in, and it's not fake it till you make it. It's more like push yourself to just get started with something, and then every step you take, you just get on with the task once. And the better you do it, you just back up yourself in the future to say, you know what, I did it last time, I can do it again. Or it's getting better and better, and it boosts your confidence. So it's fake it till you make it, but it's actually just get on with it until you feel comfortable doing it, and you can back up your brain that you can actually do it and get rid of those negative thoughts that cause that cause lack of confidence, basically.
Yeah. I think there's one other topic that we need to address, and that is that some of us are also told we're imposters, not maybe in so many words, but certainly by not looking like everybody else. I'm a woman in my 40s. I don't look like a data scientist. And I think there's a level of the world tells you that even if it's not an intentional thing, that you're an imposter, and that can reinforce the. I quoted Maya Angelou. Of course, she's a Black woman. You know, you can see how feel, and maybe in her intellectual peers at that time period in the US, she might have had cause to feel like she didn't look like an author, just the same way I did. There's every so often on LinkedIn, somebody will post the thing, women don't negotiate their salaries. That's one of the reasons why they're paid less. And then somebody will counter with research showing that actually women, when they do negotiate, are more likely to be knocked back and refused on it, or in fact, they might be penalised for negotiating, because there's just gendered expectations that are at play there, which teaches women not to negotiate, because why would you negotiate if you're just going to be looked down on for it and you're not going to get any additional money from it? So there's no value in negotiating from that social perspective, from that social set of experiences. So we can't. Imposter syndrome was originally noted in women. That was where it kind of came from. And I think there's a very good reason why women in the workplace might feel like they were imposters, because we do kind of hold women to higher standards for expertise. We don't see them naturally as leaders, and we've had to kind of fight for those things. And that's been very recently. My mum lost her job when she had me. That was what happened. She left, and she had to wait until my sister, who's 13 years younger than me, then graduated uni before she could go back to a job of the same level as she had at the time. So we're still learning these things, and our environment is still reinforcing these lessons for us, and it'll be a while before we can work through this. So there are internal reasons, there are context reasons, but there are also external messages that might contribute to your feelings of imposter syndrome. And it's no reflection on you if you find it harder to overcome this level of anxiety just because of the reinforcing messages. Maybe you're disabled, or maybe you can't work as long hours as some. Maybe like me, you've got children and can't go to hackathons at the weekend. There are lots of ways that different circumstances can play into a feeling of imposter syndrome, and you just need to do it anyway. you need to overcome the anxiety to the extent that you can do what you need to do, and say, but my contribution is still valid. And you need to be able to say that and move on. But the messages are there, and it's no surprise that we react to them.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I guess it is valid that when you are the only one in the room with certain characteristics, whether it's gender, age, anything, is normal to feel a bit like an imposter. But to be honest, I feel like that's when you add the most value. If you're the only one in the room with those characteristics, then you're bringing something in that room, that, and some opinions that need to be heard, something different. And I think that's when you really add value. So it's important to take the opportunities to be in those rooms and take the opportunities to take those roles, because I think, yeah, that's very important thing to do. And it might be difficult and you might feel the imposter syndrome more than ever, but it's important to just be there.
Yeah, 100%. And interestingly, like on your point around that's when you add the most value. I know, like I've had a conversation with my manager who hires kind of globally for the company. He prefers candidates that, I'm not sure what the exact phrase would be. It's maybe not quite imposter syndrome, but that feel that they've got something to prove, and they're maybe, you know, considered like they're maybe considered not as quote unquote good, because he feels that they're, you know, they are more self-aware, and they've probably got more to give to the company than someone who thinks that they're you know, the best qualified person for the job. If there is a bit of uncertainty, then you know, I guess you can judge on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but he looks for that quality in candidates.
You don't want somebody who can already do everything in a job either. That little bit of uncertainty, that is room for growth. That's room where you can really make a role your own, and you will probably feel more settled in that role after a bit of time. So it's actually, as a hiring manager, quite a positive thing to have that little space to grow, that little things to bring to the role, and spaces where you can grow together. So yeah, you don't always want the person that's gonna smash it or says they're going to smash it.
Yeah, and I guess when in my head, when I'm thinking about technology and data and the industry that changes so quickly, and you want new ideas all the time, you don't want to hire some of the same people that you already have, because where will the new ideas come from? You want someone different. So I can definitely see how imposter syndrome can bring those negative thoughts in, but actually being an imposter or different might actually work on your benefit in some ways.
So can I ask you a question, Marianne? I know it's not traditional for panelists to ask the host, but
yes, please do.
You've got a particular set of experience that we haven't got, because we're technical people working in a technical world. Now you're a non-technical person working in a technical world. I would like to reflect on technical roles have a tendency to undervalue non-technical skills. And I think we've all seen that happen in practice. How does it feel being a data lab person, working with so many brilliant, talented people? Do you find that you doubt yourself sometimes?
I think when I started this job, most definitely, because it was like, you know, as you've described, Alan, just like, you know, suddenly I find myself in this job and I thought, I actually don't know a thing about anything at all. And I think it took me a while to settle into that, and then think, well, I'm not actually here because I'm a data person. I mean, like probably a couple of years, if not 3 years. But I'm not here because I'm a technical person. I've got different skills. I'm a connector. I'm a networker. I'm the person that gets things going. I'm a bit of a catalyst, a bit of firework. So I think I wouldn't have felt that 20 years ago. It probably would have been too much for me. But I think as I've got older, I'm just much more accepting of myself and of my value. And I mean, that is a journey, isn't it? So yes, I do often, sometimes when I am meeting people like Alan or Christina or even you, Joanna, I just think, oh God, they're gonna find out that I use Excel all the time and I can't actually do Python very well. But actually that really doesn't matter for my job, because that's not what it's about. I mean, obviously I do, as a person, for my own personal development, need to work on these skills, but nobody expects me to, talk technical. And in fact, whenever I've tried it, it's failed. So you've got to have an authenticity. You've got to know, be happy with yourself and be happy in what you have to give. As Christina has said, being that other person in the room is definitely valuable. Even though sometimes I think, I know I can't contribute here because they're just talking technical, and it's gone beyond. But I'm not often in those discussions. I'm not the person that is, talking to technical customers. I'm bringing people together to find common ground and share. But it's just interesting because this is, we're all talking. We've got 3 data professionals. Have you ever talked about imposter syndrome in your PDR or at work or with colleagues? Is it talked about in the data and AI industry?
I think the reason that people thought about me when they came to this panel might have been from an away day at the Data Lab one time. So occasionally Data Lab would take us away and we'd go to a hotel for a bit and we'd all talk about Data Lab and strategy and things. One of them, one of the sort of after bits, I went around and went to everybody, have you heard of imposter syndrome? You know what it is? And I actually just kind of asked like 7 or 8 people around, have you ever heard of it? And I was surprised by the people who admitted to it. I was surprised by the people that admitted to it. I don't know if that experience is one of the reasons why I'm here today, but it's certainly one of the few times that I've seen it publicly discussed in person, other than, LinkedIn articles and YouTube videos, sure, but no, not sort of face to face so much. That's one of the few times I've done it.
I think I would say sometimes like I've had a discussion with a few people, and I think it is relatively common in our industry, especially when things change so often, and especially at the moment with large language models, every day there's 47 new papers and 100 different techniques, and things change so quickly. So I definitely think that it's something a lot of people have, and people probably are not very keen to mention it. But if you mention it, then I think you find it's more common than maybe conventional wisdom, or maybe not. Actually, 7 out of 10, you figure. I think probably most people have experienced it, and I think talk about it to some extent, but maybe not super openly all the time.
I guess sorry.
No, sorry. I think I'm just kind of thinking that, and it's useful. I feel like it's useful to talk about it for a certain amount of time, and then at some point it becomes less useful, and you sort of have to. Again, I'm kind of struggling for the words. Sort of put it in a box, and you go, I know I've got this thing, but I'm just going to put it over there now and focus on what I'm trying to do. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I interrupted you. I guess for me, when I first joined the industry, I don't think it was talked that much. I think through the years it's been discussed a bit more, and I see that it comes down to the culture of an organization, of how much these things are being discussed. Luckily for us, development, well-being, these are all very well thought in the organization that I work with in NatWest. So it is being discussed, and people are always keen to help. At least that's my experience. But yeah, definitely when it comes to talking about it, I would usually go to someone that I feel comfortable talking to. Definitely a mentor helps. If it's something that you see that is an obstacle for you to progress or to go for opportunities. So I think it's very much worth finding someone you trust and build a relationship of trust, a mentoring relationship, and just talk about it.
That's really good advice. And I mean, as I said in my intro, the Data Lab community has a mentor group. And so if anyone who's listening is interested in finding a mentor, that's a good place to start. So we've talked about, it seems like apart from the support that you found yourself, this isn't an issue that's, a headliner in organisations or in PDRs, but how do you look out for your staff, your colleagues, the people that you work with? What sort of support can you give them? We talked about how, this is quite a private thing, even though most of us are feeling it. What can we do to support people, as the young people, especially those in our audience that are looking forward to a career in data and AI? How can we support them?
I'm gonna jump in. I would say that feedback is a very good way of doing it, because at the beginning I would, for example, do something minor like a presentation, and I would think in my head, oh my God, that went terribly and that didn't go well, blah, blah. But then when I would talk to colleagues, they would tell me that was very good, well done. And that's not the thoughts I was having. So basically giving feedback to people can really help them see how people see them. And when they have those negative thoughts, they can fight them this way. So if you see someone doing something good, or improving on something, and you see that they're putting effort in something and it's going well, just tell them. I feel like being a cheerleader really helps, because it's all down to confidence. So helping young people build their confidence when they do something great, I think is very important.
Culture's a big part of it as well, isn't it? You need to have a culture where there's no blame culture. So blame culture is a culture where when you do something wrong, you only find out it was wrong. Somebody slaps your wrist. That's how you found out it was something wrong. The better and more positive culture that would help people to succeed and help people to experiment and learn is when they have clear expectations for what success looks like up front. So that ability to be constructive with how we handle failure and helpful and positive about what we can learn from it and take it away. That ability to set clear expectations, that ability to have an open culture where people can be a little bit vulnerable, these things can all really help people talk about things like imposter syndrome or a lack of confidence, or how their experience of their own identity or their own struggles is impacting their ability to perform. And these are all things that will help with even something as simple as imposter syndrome. So that sort of culture piece is something that I don't think you can undervalue. I don't think you can overvalue. I think it's quite a key part to helping people bring their best selves to their work.
It's a good point on failure as well. I think we often learn the most things when it depends how you brand it as something as a failure, but you often learn the most when you make mistakes, and that's how you get better and you grow. And I think even when you look back on those things, there'll be a lot of things that people have done well, and it's about, I think sometimes it's about having that external validation, to have somebody say, well, that was a really good job, or this bit here was really good, and it almost adds that. It does all come back to confidence, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and one more thing to add, I guess, is just by keeping an eye for each other is key. For example, if you see that someone would be perfect for an opportunity, for a project, for a presentation, something, and they just don't go for it, it's important to check in and see, I think that would be great for you. Why didn't you go for it? And maybe that opens a conversation that otherwise they wouldn't start, or they wouldn't think of. And that way you show that you see something in them, like, I see that you could do it. Well, their imposter syndrome will tell them, no, I can't do it. So just keep an eye for each other, I think, is key.
And that being willing to say something positive about people and to praise where praise is due, that's people, you just think that people know how brilliant they are. You think that people see in themselves the same thing that you see in you, but very often they don't. Very often they're sitting there going, maybe not quite. I see my failures more than my successes. I see my weaknesses more than my strengths. Maybe sometimes they need that reminder. Yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. I think it's really important that we do value and support people, as they develop, and that we are trying not to be too self-critical, because a bit of self-reflection is really important. That's the way you grow, by thinking, I could have done that a lot better. If I just read that book, that or read that whatever. But sometimes, you know, I don't know whether that's a Scottish thing. Christina, maybe you can tell us, just that settling on the negative thing, that you can't really get beyond it. You think, well, you know, nobody's actually really even noticed.
I think that's a human thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a human thing, and it's a lot easier to forget the successes that you have, especially the small ones. You're just like, oh yeah, I did that. It's no big deal. But actually, if you look back 3 years ago, could you do it? Maybe it's a big step that through time you just ignored, and just focus on the negative ones. But I think it's a human thing that we all do. So keep an eye on successes. I think is critical. Yeah.
I had a line manager at one point who organised a feedback session, you know, just a Microsoft Teams forum. Everybody could fill it in. You picked your colleagues that you wanted feedback from. This line manager was very specific about how they were going to provide this feedback, and they were going to read through every single compliment out loud that came up on this feedback. So everything positive that they said, that those compliments were read word for word all the way through. Wasn't that nice of them? And it was, in one level, a little bit embarrassing, but that line manager was absolutely correct in their observations that if you didn't do that, out of the 15 or 25 comments that you got, you would be looking at the 2 that had room for improvement, right? Even if they weren't that scathing, even if they were vaguely positive and your colleagues seemed to actually like you, that room for improvement would be in your head. And I think when that tactic was kind of used on me, it was very good for making sure that I didn't give equal play in my head to I gave it a lot more thought about what I was doing well, so that I didn't lose sight of the fact that I was bringing value. And I think that was quite an interesting exercise, and I've kind of held that with me in the years since that we went through that exercise. That was an interesting experience. I don't know if I would do it again, because there is a level of embarrassment to it that's quite difficult to go through, but I'm pleased that that one person did go through it. Glad that we tried it.
I think I would say on the how to stop focusing on the negative and focus on the positives. And I give you this analogy, and you can tell me if it works. Like, I think the negative is quite often like a perceived, outcome, and you can't necessarily control the outcome. You can kind of only really control the inputs and like what you put into it, how you prepare, how you approach it, whatever the situation is. So I think, like, recognize that there is a negative there and there's a concern about something, but there's often not, that doesn't really help to progress it. So try to focus on the inputs, like what can you do to try and mitigate whatever that perceived negative is. And I think that, I'd like to think that would be useful, but you could be your own judges.
No, absolutely. And I was gonna add that something that I do, and I know I'm doing it, is that when I get good feedback, I'm thinking, oh, they're just saying that because, they like me, and, I ignore the good feedback and I just go straight to like what I need to develop, because in my head, that's the important thing. But your strengths are equally as important, if not more, because actually they're your strengths. That's what you're good at. So just embrace that feedback. It's good. Just accept it, basically.
Yeah. I once upon a time went on an Equate Scotland course, and it was called something like Realising Your Strengths. And I had a bit of an eye-opening moment at it, because up until then, strengths had been like passing an exam on something. You work at it, you get good at it. I can now do Python, tick box, fair enough. But actually, that course didn't think of strengths as things that you have learned to do. They talked about strengths as things that energize you, things that you enjoy, things that you feel excited about. They talked about the things that you can really bring to the table, and the idea that there's things that you could do that you have skills in, but they're not really strengths, because when you do them, you're I'm just going to get this done. Tick box. Here's another spreadsheet, kind of thing. And not recognizing that actually what you need to spend your time on are the things that you really light up with, things that you bring enthusiasm to. Those are the spaces where you're going to add the most value. And you can't add value at everything. There is no person out there that can be strong at absolutely everything. So your weaknesses don't define you. Your strengths define you. So you need to find ways of making those strengths pay and bring them into the table and use them. And don't worry about the weaknesses because they're not important. We're all weak at loads of stuff.
There's a
All of
great
us.
thing, I don't know if it's still a thing, the Gallup Strengths Finder.
Yeah.
And you can, for people that don't know, I'm sure it must still exist. You buy a book, it's about £10. You fill in a whole load of questions, and they tell you what your like top 5 strengths are. And the kind of premises of it is, who cares about the weaknesses? Because if you can improve your strengths a little bit, that has a much like larger effect than improving the weaknesses, and the strengths are the things that are important.
Oh, these are brilliant sort of nuggets. Because, you know, one of my questions was going to be top tips for looking the real deal when feeling like an imposter. Because that's what it's about, isn't it? You've got to put on a cloak of confidence or authenticity, because that's what people see.
Yeah. And half of it's just, okay, this is where I am. There's a lot of things happening that are triggering this feeling. It will get better with time. It's a very normal response, and I can't let it dictate how I behave or what I bring to the table or what choices I make, because it is my worst self. It is my anxiety. It is all the things I've been taught to worry about speaking, and that's not my best self. That's not my strength. So I need to be able to sit at the table anyway.
So I read this because I was doing a little bit of reading, got me down a lot of rabbit holes. I thought none of it was that relevant, but I was reading it anyway, and I thought I quite like this. True imposters don't feel imposter syndrome. So I just thought maybe we've got a few minutes. We could just have a quick. Do you agree with that, or disagree, or?
I think it seems plausible to me, because by sort of definition, you know, you're trying to project something, and I'm kind of thinking you probably don't necessarily care about what your own knowledge is, as long as you project whatever it is you're trying to project, and so you probably don't necessarily feel it. Just kind of my hot take.
I guess I would agree with the statement, because you see that usually imposters do this like big bold move and they have all this confidence and to actually be imposters. And I feel like when you have imposter syndrome, it's completely the opposite. We tend to like close and miss off opportunities and not being out there. So I would definitely feel like, yeah, true imposters don't have imposter syndrome. They just go full on. So I would definitely feel like if I feel like I have a bit of imposter syndrome, that means I should be doing something. That means that it's just me getting out of my comfort zone and I need to keep pushing. In that sense, obviously, check that you're not being an imposter and fill the room. But at the same time, yeah, I do agree with that.
So just looking at some of the questions, we've got a couple here, and I think one of our attendees says, if you lack confidence, how can you even get a job in a new career in data? Anyone like to take that?
I think that I would draw a distinction between imposter syndrome and lacking confidence. There's always certain spaces where you will have confidence. So if you have an MSc in data, or you've got a lot of experience working in data, and you're bringing enough to the table that a job in data is in any way a possibility, then you will have a level of confidence in those skills and in your abilities in there. Imposter syndrome usually comes from the other space where you're focusing on the things that you can't bring to the table. And it's not about not having the skills for the job, or not being able to move forward, or not be able to bring something to the table. As we discussed, actually very often when you most feel like an imposter is when you're bringing a lot of value to a space or a discussion or a project. So I wouldn't say that because you have imposter syndrome it means you don't have confidence. I just mean it's just being conscious of your own insecurities. That's when your insecurities are part of it. And actually you can have both. You can have confidence and you can have imposter syndrome at the same time, and it's not actually as much of a paradox as it might think.
Just to reflect a bit back on my experience, I feel like when you apply for jobs and it's your first job as well, and you don't have that experience that everybody's asking for, and you start getting rejected from various jobs and internships, it puts your confidence even more down, and that's when you really start doubting yourself. By the end of the day, when you go to an interview, somebody has to get that job, and there is a reason why even you are in that interview and why your CV passed, and there is something you're good at. So I think it's worth just focusing on the things that you are good at and you bring on the table. And if you don't get one job, then that means it's not the right one, and it just saves you some trouble really than just getting the wrong job. So at the end of the day, I think it's just, it might not be too comforting, like telling someone, oh, be confident and go for it. By the end of the day, you'll get a job, and somebody will get that job. So just try your best and just keep trying, basically.
I think that is a fantastically positive point to end on. And this has been an absolute pleasure. I wondered whether this would be difficult, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I feel as though we're sitting around a table in a cafe with a pot of coffee on the table. We've talked about a lot, we've explored a lot. I just want to remind the audience that the Data Lab community has a mentor group, and that I think is a good place to go if you feel any of these things that we've talked about, and you're wanting to reflect on your own reaction to the changes that are ahead when you move into the next phase. So I'd just like to thank our fabulous panel. They're absolutely brilliant. It's been a pleasure. And I would also, just as a last comment, say that the Data Lab is running Data Talent on the 12th of March, and that's a great opportunity for anyone that's looking for a job in data to come along to find out what's going on. We've got a jobs hall, there are workshops, there's a lot of opportunities to network and speak to people, like-minded people. I'd really recommend that for anyone looking for a next step. We hope to see you all there, and thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.